Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer, here with you guys today. This is a part 2 to the Ascendant in Esoteric Astrology and its planetary ruler. So this is following up on some points that I really needed to add to the first video. So please watch the first video if you haven't. I'll put a link below so that you can identify which one it is, because I have done a few videos on esoteric astrology. Before I go ahead and discuss the esoteric rulers, to make things more clear, I would just like to read a passage out of a book, one of my books by Alan Oken, which is called Soul-Centered Astrology. Wonderful book, wonderful astrologer, very comprehensive book, pretty much covers most of what you need to know. He's been able to jam-pack very meaningful and detailed information about esoteric astrology that would take you so long to find in, volumes and volumes of books that have been written by the Theosophical Society and Bailey and all her work, which derives from way back, and Madame Blavatsky and the likes of those individuals who have done extensive work on esoteric astrology. Alan Oken is the modern sort of person, you could say, I guess, who's put a lot of his effort and work into esoteric astrology. He's still around with us now. That's why I say modern, whereas the people I mentioned just before belong to a different era altogether. Okay, so I'd like to read this passage because it is just truly beautiful, and it's a very nice way to step into some soul energy, esoteric astrology. It is impossible to attain our divinity or to reach perfection without passing through the soul and becoming a soul. When we come in contact with our soul, fuse with its light, and grow as a soul, then the mysteries will be revealed to our opening eyes, and the past, present, and future will be ours. We shall become free souls, free from time and matter, and we will enjoy the presence of the everlasting, ever-existent light. That's on page 349 from the book that I just mentioned, and I just really, really love that particular passage. Okay, so here we go. So I'm going to name the 12 zodiac signs with their exoteric ruler and esoteric ruler. So in the previous video, what I did was I discussed the 7 rays very briefly and gave a few key words to what each ray symbolizes. As I said also in the previous video, we all have a soul ray and a personality ray. We also have an astral ray and some others, the monad ray, etheric, can't quite remember now, I've just forgotten. Anyway, never mind, because I'm not focusing on the others for today at least. I predominantly work with the soul and personality ray, and I have actually done a video, which perhaps I'll pop a link below for that one as well. This is an audio today, so the screen's not accidentally blank. It's deliberately blank. I've just decided to do an audio simply because things move a lot faster with audio as opposed to video. And I'm just very busy at the moment. I have done a previous video on the importance of the integration of the soul and personality and what that looks like, what that actually really means. So please watch that video to get greater understanding of what I'm talking about when I'm discussing esoteric astrology, because the basic premise of esoteric astrology is the path of initiation, our journey, our evolution, and the integration of the soul and personality so that they are in unison, not in discord. And, one way that usually gets strongly triggered in people, it's very common for it to happen in your early 40s when you have the Uranus opposition. That's quite a typical experience. People start the search, if they have not done so already, they start the search of what does my life mean? What the hell am I actually doing here? What's the purpose of my life? Because the Uranus opposition wakes up the thirst for greater understandings and spiritual understanding and meaning in our lives. So, in other words, you could say, generally speaking, that the first 40 or so years for most people are generally personality based, personality dominated. So the individual is finding themselves or seeking to find themselves through the external reality, right? Or their version of their reality. And that's fine, and in some cases necessary. But there's a lot of building of the personality for the first 40 years, and it gets to like a climax point when that opposite Uranus comes along, and it shakes people's worlds and people's lives, and it causes them to really start seeing things from a very different perspective. At the very best, it can really wake people up into different dimensions and totally new understandings of who they are and what their life is about. And of course, at worst, it can be incredibly disruptive and chaotic, and bring a great deal of struggle to people's lives as well. So it really just depends on who you are and how you've lived your life really up until that point, and what have you done, on the internal planes to build internal resources for deeper understanding of everything, really, and most importantly, yourself. So that's the sort of, you could say in a nutshell, the essence of esoteric astrology. It's the fusing and the merging of the personality and the soul, so that there's a sense of unison, and through that can come a greater sense of fulfillment, richness, meaning and purpose, understanding, compassion, sensitivity, empathy, for yourself, but also for humanity at large. Because in Eastern traditions and teachings and philosophies, it is said and understood that every human being on the planet is here to serve. So some of us are very in tune with that, very aware, and working on those levels in our life, and some of us are not. So, but in truth, we are all here to serve. We're serving Source, the divine. Really, that's what we're all doing, and it's all connected to the bigger picture. It's connected to everyone. We're not serving for ourselves. We're serving for humanity, for the bigger, greater good. So to speak. So esoteric astrology tends to appeal to people who are on that path of initiating those deeper understandings and asking those bigger and deeper questions about life, because the realization emerges that it doesn't matter how much I acquire externally in terms of material value, or recognition, reputation, and so forth. There is something about those aspects of life, whilst they are fulfilling and can bring a great deal of comfort to life in certain ways, luxurious aspects of life, and so on and so forth. It doesn't actually feed the soul. It doesn't nurture the soul, and that's why the seeking begins, because there's a sense of emptiness, in a way, you could say, because people, they can buy a bigger house, a bigger car, and put more money in the bank, and the bigger that becomes, the more they want, because the ego is insatiable. It can never have enough. It's always wanting more and more and more. Remember, the ego is really always about seeking pleasure. It doesn't want anything to do with pain. or suffering. But we can't access the soul experiences or soul life or integrate that if we can't enter the realms that may be much harder to enter, much more challenging, much more confronting, and quite painful as well, because we are bringing into every incarnation everything else that we've experienced and lived previously. So we can't, we don't just step in with a clean slate, brand new, and here we are, and this is it, and that's all there is to it, in my opinion, at least, anyway. Hence, there's a lot of residue. There's a lot of past life memories that are retained in the right part of the brain, which is ruled by Uranus. So there's so many dimensions going on within us in any given incarnation. Okay, so going back to the signs and their rulerships. Aries, traditional ruler Mars. Soul-centered ruler or esoteric ruler, Mercury. Now, if this is the first time you've heard this, it's really it's really different, isn't it? You know, getting your head around that. How does Mercury rule Aries? Well, it does esoterically. And in order to understand that, you have to do a fair bit of reading on esoteric astrology. Taurus, traditional ruler Venus. Soul-centered ruler Vulcan. Now, I mentioned Vulcan in the previous video. As I said, in esoteric astrology, Vulcan and the Earth are associated with certain signs of the zodiac, just as all the other planets are that we use. So their purpose and value and meaning is as equal as all the other planets, but we're just not used to using those bodies in exoteric astrology, which is why you've got to get your head around a totally different way of understanding this information. And I've got to be honest, most of it is not really just understanding it from the left brain, because the left brain will just it'll just bring up so many questions. And this is not about questions. This is really about allowing the higher self to come through. It's about your intuition. It's about getting a sense of things out of the left brain field and into the right brain field, which is so expansive, where consciousness lives and grows. So Gemini is ruled by Mercury, as we know, traditional ruler, and soul-centered ruler. When I say soul-centered, I mean esoteric. It's just two different words, but it's the same thing, okay? Where was I? Gemini, Mercury, and soul-centered ruler is Venus, which is really interesting, because Gemini is not a sign that in exoteric astrology we would associate with the experience of love necessarily, right? But in esoteric, it is very much that, hence why its ruler is Venus. Cancer, ruled by the moon, and the esoteric ruler is Neptune. Leo is the sun, both in exoteric and esoteric astrology. That's the only one. Pretty sure there's one more coming up where it's the same ruler. Virgo is Mercury traditionally, and esoterically it's the moon. I've always found this incredibly fascinating, and I've observed it through the years. My mother has her moon in Virgo, so her esoteric ruler is the moon, as opposed to Mercury ruling her moon, right? And what I've seen with people who have moon in Virgo is tremendous ability for clairvoyant abilities, basically. Clairvoyant, psychic, whatever word you want to use, but the ability to tap into these other realms psychically and basically receive information and messages and wisdom and knowledge and understandings that the left brain absolutely cannot. So that's the very interesting thing about Virgo and the ruler being the moon in esoteric astrology. So for those of you who have moon in Virgo, if you know others who have moon in Virgo, pay attention to that, because esoterically the ruler is the moon, which gives them quite a psychic, very powerful intuition quality to their moon. Libra is traditionally Venus, and this is going to sound crazy, but in esoteric astrology, Uranus is the ruler of Libra. Scorpio, here's one where it stays the same. Traditionally, it's ruled by Mars and Pluto, and in esoteric astrology, it's also ruled by Mars. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter traditionally. In esoteric astrology, Sagittarius is ruled by the Earth. There's another unusual one. Capricorn is the same for both. So Saturn, traditional ruler, and esoteric ruler is also Saturn. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn and Uranus traditionally, and in esoteric astrology, it's ruled by Jupiter. So if you have Aquarius ascendant, and this will apply to all the previous ones that I just read as well. If you have Aquarius ascendant, then your esoteric ruler is Jupiter. So it would be very, very important to pay attention to what Jupiter is doing in your chart natally. You know, what sign is it in? What house is it in? What aspects does it have? That's always going to be your base, your groundwork when you are looking at any planet in a birth chart, whether it's from an esoteric level, exoteric level, Hellenistic astrology, medieval astrology, whatever level of astrology. There's the foundation is always examining the condition of a planet, right? Now, there are different meanings perhaps, or different points that are added depending on which lens you are looking through. Evolutionary astrology, there's another model. But you are always, regardless of which model you are using, you are always assessing the condition of a planet. So if you had Aquarius as your rising sign, Jupiter is a very, very important planet in your chart because it rules your soul, basically. And so Aquarius rising is a pretty cool one to have, because when you have Jupiter as the ruler of your soul, that's pretty awesome, in my opinion. I am being biased because I've got Aquarius rising, so I'm being a little bit biased there. But at the same time, I am being objective because in my own chart, I have Jupiter in Sagittarius, right? So my Jupiter is one of the strongest planets in my chart. It's in rulership, it's in a good house, it's got good aspects, etc., etc. So when I have soul-changing experiences in my life, which happen mostly on an inner plane, on an inner level, it is Jupiter that describes the experiences that I'm having. So fortunately, I'm very blessed in that way. And again, you know, whatever your ascendant is and whatever the exoteric ruler is and the esoteric ruler is, it is very useful to be examining both when you are looking at transits and progressions. Finally, Pisces, this is going to be very interesting for you guys if you haven't heard this before. So as we know, traditionally, Jupiter and Neptune are the planets that we look to for Pisces. And in esoteric astrology, it's Pluto. Pluto rules Pisces, which is incredibly fascinating to me and very, very powerful. And if you think about it, you can make the connection of, in evolutionary astrology, Pluto rules the soul, which I 100% agree with. In esoteric astrology, the ascendant is the soul, and I 100% agree with that. And you can work with both those perspectives. I've been doing it for a while, and I know that you can. the thing I was going to say about Pluto ruling Pisces esoterically, one of the reasons I think that's so powerful and so interesting and intriguing is because Pisces, being the last sign of the zodiac, the 12th house, symbolizing everything. Everything that we know of and that we don't know of is contained within Pisces in the 12th house. It's the sign of completion and endings. It's a sign of truth, the ultimate truth. And it's the three water signs, all of them are connected to the soul, each in different ways. So Pisces is the energy that takes us into the inner dimensions, into our soul life. All the water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, they pull us into ourself. They pull us in and under. Whereas the fire signs pull us up and out. And these are good key points to remember. They're basic, but they're very powerful points, because when you are connecting with somebody who's got a lot of water in their chart, most of their life is going to be experienced internally. And when people have a lot of water in their chart, it can be very difficult to know them, to know where they're coming from, to understand their inner private world, because water signs are the most private people of all the signs. So Pisces being ruled by Pluto, it's kind of like the soul and the soul, because Pisces represents the entirety of absolutely everything, of truth, oneness, God, goddess, divine, source. And Pluto is the soul, which comes from source anyway. So there's this, it's sort of hard to explain, but I love that connection with Pluto and Pisces on an esoteric level, which is, as I said, it's a bit challenging to kind of get your head around this stuff, because you really need to enter a very different space inside you, and predominantly your right brain and your soul, to start to get a real feel for how these energies play out on an esoteric level. So if people are very personality orientated, then this stuff is not going to interest you to begin with. So if you're listening to this, then you are, more than likely an individual, a soul who is on a very unique journey, who's seeking answers for yourself, for your life, seeking to understand and connect and make sense and find meaning and purpose to who you are and everything you've been through and everything you are going through and everything you will go through. So, yeah, so the personality and the soul, when there's a sense of integration and fusion between the two, a person starts to experience life and perceive life very, very differently. Another way you could say that is that people who are more soul-orientated tend to be less reactive, for instance, less animated as well, to a degree. It's the personality that reacts to situations and conditions. When you're not happy about something, when you're frustrated, when you're pissed off, when you're angry at something or someone, well, that's a reaction. And that's a reaction from the ego and the personality, because if you're frustrated at something or angry at someone, it's almost always because you don't like what you're hearing, you don't like what's being told to you. The situation, whatever it may be, is not pleasing you. That's the personality. The personality seeks pleasure, as I said earlier. But the soul doesn't operate like that. The soul has infinite compassion, you could say, infinite wisdom and insight and understanding. So it doesn't have that, it doesn't need to react, on everything that happens in life. Instead, what it does is it reflects on things in much deeper spaces. It takes time out to process, to understand and to learn better, to grow, to develop, and to evolve. Ego and personality is not interested in evolving. It's just interested in having a good time. I'm not, and by the way, I'm not putting the ego and the personality down. Clearly, it's a fundamental component in enabling us to express ourselves, and it's there for a reason, right? So if it wasn't important and necessary, we wouldn't be born into these physical bodies, and we wouldn't have these personalities and these egos. There's very good reasons why that's all in place. The point I'm making, though, with esoteric astrology is that we need to find ways to understand that the soul intentions and desires are where it's at and where it needs to be at. Because if we remain at the personality and ego desires, where we are not really evolving, we are just we're just experiencing life from that personality level, which keeps us in fairly lower vibrational states. It keeps us in lower states of consciousness. And again, I'm not making a judgment in good or bad. Those two words, good or bad, I try to completely avoid in my vocabulary. It doesn't matter who I'm talking to or what I'm talking about, simply because they presume so much judgment in some kind of way, or acceptance. And life and the soul, in the bigger scheme of things, is not about good or bad. That's the mind. The mind likes to split things up, and the ego, and likes to divide and separate and make things either good or bad, right? So, that person's good because they were really nice to me, and that person's not good because they've been an asshole to me. If we remained at that level of perceiving or understanding, we wouldn't evolve. So this is the beauty of esoteric astrology. It shifts us into a different level of understanding so that we can see things from a higher plane, from our soul and from our right brain as well. I just want to make a couple of comments about the planets on an esoteric level. So the sun should always be looked upon as a vehicle for the energy and the ray of the personality. The sun always brings in the energy of the second ray. Remember, ray number 2 is love wisdom, ruled by Jupiter and the sun. Adding cohesion and creative potential to one's life, yet a close examination of the sun sign and that sign's exoteric and esoteric rulers is very important. For example, should the sun be in Aquarius, one would know the personality is operating through the 5th ray as an important field for its expression. 5th ray because Aquarius connects to the 5th ray, okay, in terms of the 7 rays that I've mentioned in the previous video. Should the sun be in Capricorn, 3 rays are important to the personality, 1st, 3rd, and 7th. In this case, look to the sign Saturn, tenants, and the ray of that sign. Now that, I know that sounds a bit complicated, and it is, because what I just read is from that website of the link that I will have below this audio presentation. What's happening here is that they are describing the sun's expression and energy purely from an esoteric level, hence why it is being connected to the different signs that belong to one of the 7 rays, right? But what I'll do is I won't read the entirety of each paragraph because we'll be here a long time, but just to give you a couple of key points. So the moon, which I find this is very interesting because the moon in exoteric astrology, traditional astrology, is always associated with the past. Okay, in evolutionary astrology, the moon is also associated with the past. In esoteric astrology, it's the same thing. The moon connects the individual to the past. It brings in the energy of the 4th ray and the struggle between form and essence. This is, I will read the rest of this because this is very interesting. It represents those patterns and forms of self-expression that have been created and anchored in previous incarnations. It is also the source of the form of life, and that is actually a statement that comes from Hellenistic traditional astrology. The moon always rules form. So I'll just start that sentence again. It is also the source of the form of life and must come under the direction of the soul. Vulcan, planet of the 1st ray, is always involved in the process of destruction of outworn tools of the personality. It breaks down the patterns and thought forms, desires and attachment to desires, so that the soul may further externalize its purpose and work. Now, that comment is just freaking brilliant and so telling about how powerful Vulcan is. And if you are new at astrology, you wouldn't even know what Vulcan is or what it looks like. As I said, it's always located right next to the sun in the birth chart. So if you are a Pisces and your sun is 20 degrees of Pisces, Vulcan will be there either at 21, 20, 22 degrees, right? It's always just a couple of degrees away from the sun. And when you are working with alchemy, now alchemy can really describe many different things, right? But fundamentally, alchemy is about transforming, isn't it? So Vulcan brings in, it's the transforming agent, just as Pluto is, but on a different level. That gives us access to the inner alchemist, where we start basically chipping away and going in deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper within ourselves to, like, it's like peeling the onion, right? Peeling layer by layer by layer by layer, purifying, purging, cleansing, transforming what is outworn, what is no longer useful, and what keeps you attached on that personality level. So how powerful is Vulcan when you think about that and when you realize that? Mercury, when in aspect with another planet, brings in the energy of the 4th ray, but as a harmonizing influence. The energy and function of Mercury seeks to relate pairs of opposites so that a greater creative harmony may eventuate. It is very definitely a vehicle of refinement, as it ever seeks to birth those divine ideas for the plan of human evolution. Now, the reason it's described in that way is because Mercury connects to ray number 4, and ray number 4 is harmony through conflict, right? And it's, as I said in the previous video, ray number 4 is the artist as well, the divine artist. Just want to check something here. Just bear with me. Okay, so Mercury. I have got so many books and notes and stuff, guys. So my kitchen table is just full of astrological stuff. It's crazy. But it's not messy. It's not messy. I'm not a messy person. It's all organized, but I've just got a lot of it. Okay, Mercury, here we go. So 6. Okay, I can't find what I'm looking for, so I don't want to waste any more time. The Earth's position tells us where in the practical reality of our daily lives we may find our Dharma, Earth-based responsibility. When in aspect to other planets, it adds the energy of the third ray. This serves to give a cohesive focus to active intelligence in order to externalize those concepts and ideas so that Dharma may be fulfilled. So you can see from that the Earth in the birth chart, which you can draw up the Earth in the birth chart as well. You just need to set that up in your software and see where it falls in your chart. Sounds weird, I know. So, but you know, esoteric astrology is really it's really other dimensional stuff. You know, it's wisdom and truth from other dimensions, and our left brain really struggles with it. So you just, as I said before, and I've said it a couple of times, you have to get out of the left brain to start to understand these teachings. Venus is the harmonizing influence of the fifth ray, which serves to blend and fuse opposites into greater creative wholes. Now, see, that sounds very much like Mercury, doesn't it? Because Venus and Mercury are the planets that connect to the fourth ray, which is harmony through conflict. So, yeah. Venus always gives the potential for greater evolution, development, and abundance of spiritual potential to any planet that she touches. Naturally, when such a contact is by a difficult aspect, these benefits may be a bit harder to achieve, but the potential for victory is there. So Venus, yeah, she has a much bigger role on an esoteric level when you listen to what I just read to you. Mars adds a note of dissonance so that a great purity and sense of one-pointed purpose is gleaned from the battles it provokes. It is a planet of great blessing in this respect, as its ultimate goal is to reorient desire to serve the plan. That is the function of devotion, as Mars expresses the sixth ray on the soul level. If you remember, ray number 6 is ruled by Mars and Neptune. And when ray number 6 is on the personality level, so if your personality ray is number 6, the extreme example I gave in the previous video was the fanatical religious types who perform violent acts against innocent people, right? That's the extreme example. That's that focus of Mars at the most, at the personality level. That's the point. At the soul level, so if your soul ray is number 6, which is ruled by Mars Neptune, that will play out very, very differently. But it will depend on what your personality ray is. So you need to check what your soul ray is, what your personality ray is, all right? You can do it from this website, which will be below this presentation. It's a little bit complicated to get your head around. So if you're interested in having some work around that, just, email me and we can plan a session, etc. But if you can work it out yourself, by all means, go for it. Just pay very close attention to what the website says regarding the calculations. It's not as straightforward. I've had many people make mistakes and getting the completely wrong rays altogether. So if you need help and you want to do a session, please let me know. Okay, moving on. Jupiter. Jupiter is pure second ray because Jupiter is the planet that is part of ray number 2, love, wisdom. It's that inclusiveness of all, that universal love. It adds cohesiveness and heart qualities to whatever planet it touches. It works to blend and fuse love and wisdom, heart and mind into its interactions with other planets and points in the horoscope. So this is how Jupiter expresses himself esoterically. And we would have, I think, expected to have these sorts of expressions or characteristics of Jupiter esoterically, because Jupiter is the all benefic planet in exoteric astrology as well. But certainly the sign that your Jupiter is in is going to say a lot about your sense of faith in life and the divine and in yourself, period, whether that's on an esoteric level or on an exoteric level. Saturn works primarily on the mental plane, as it serves to structure thought forms into cohesive patterns for the externalization of the will power. Thus, it is the embodiment of the third ray of active intelligence. Saturn is also the vehicle for the dweller on the threshold and stands for the Lord of Karma, which is the same in exoteric astrology. Saturn always rules your karma in your chart. A barrier to great conscious expansion, unless love wisdom supersedes all other influences. Now, Saturn rules barriers, which is interesting that even in esoteric astrology, there's a recognition around barriers can be present there as well with Saturn, and that Saturn is the Lord of Karma, and he's the threshold. He's at the threshold of our karma. Saturn is such a interesting, complex archetype, energy, and planet, and certainly one of the most difficult planets to work with and combat. And if, for example, you have Capricorn on your 12th house cusp, then what rules your 12th house? Saturn, right? In order to get an understanding of what you've brought into this life and what is lying very deeply unconscious within you, because I'm just using an example here, Capricorn on the 12th house cusp, right? To understand the energy of your 12th house, you need to locate where Saturn is in your chart, because wherever Saturn is located in your chart, now it might be in the 12th, and that becomes very complex if it is. But if it's not in the 12th and it rules your 12th house, then the way to understand and access your 12th house is to locate where Saturn is in your birth chart, because it is that through that area of your life and the sign that Saturn is in as well, that's going to help you access your 12th house gifts, secrets, karma, all sorts of stuff, really. Akashic records, that's all part of the 12th house. So anyway, there's a lot to say and always a lot to talk about, but I'll leave it there for today, because I wasn't even planning to do a long session again, but I think I've managed to stick to my reputation, which is relatively long videos or audios. Next one will be a video, because I would love to just be visually present for you guys as well. Okay, I hope that today's session just brings a little bit more understanding and insight on the ascendant of your chart, and the traditional ruler, the esoteric ruler, the 7 rays, and how to start kind of exploring this wisdom, which is all right brain. Okay, much love and blessings, guys. Please feel free to comment below. Thank you for listening and taking the time to listen. If you've listened to this all the way through, I thank you and I commend you because it does take patience. But if you're really called to hear this, you will sit through this, and if you're not, you won't, and that's okay because it's not for everyone. Nothing is for everyone. See you guys very, very soon. Much love. Bye for now.